I'm telling you this now, after the dust has settled and the silence has a different quality. It's not the silence of fear anymore. It's the silence of safety. Before him, my world was a constant, screaming noise of panic. After him, it became quiet. This is the story of how my father sold me to a monster to clear a debt, but the monster he chose turned out to be a man. And how, a year later, I learned to not just live in his world, but to command a small, important piece of it. It's the story of how I stopped running. It began, as most endings do, with a plea. The ballroom was a galaxy of glittering chandeliers and false smiles. I hated these events. I hated the way the champagne flutes chimed like tiny, brittle bells, a sound of wealth I could not comprehend. I hated the scent of a dozen clashing perfumes, a fragrant cloud of superiority. Most of all, I hated the man at the center of it all, the man who was supposed to be my father. Alastair Finch. To the world, he was a titan of industry, a philanthropist, a pillar of the community. To me, he was the architect of my brother's slow demise. I clutched the folded paper in my palm. It was damp with the sweat of my terror. It was an estimate from the hospital. A single number with so many zeros it looked like a scream. The cost of the experimental surgery that could save Leo's life. My 10-year-old brother, whose heart was a tiny, tired bird fluttering against the cage of his ribs. The doctors had given him months. Maybe. This surgery was his only hope. And Alastair was mine. I saw him standing near the grand staircase, his arm around his wife, Isabella, my stepmother. Her laughter was sharp and condescending, a sound that had flayed pieces of my spirit since I was a child. She saw me first. Her perfectly painted smile tightened by a fraction of a millimeter. A dismissal. I was an embarrassment. The daughter from his first, less advantageous marriage. The quiet, mousy secretary he kept employed out of a twisted sense of public-facing duty. A reminder of a past he had worked so hard to bury. I moved forward anyway. My dress was cheap. A simple black sheath I had owned for years. Beside Isabella's diamond-encrusted gown, I felt like a shadow. "Father," I said. My voice was a thread, barely audible over the orchestra. He turned, his face a mask of polite inquiry. That was his public face, the one he used for reporters and board members. "Alara, you should be mingling." It was a soft rebuke, a command disguised as a suggestion. "I need to speak with you," I insisted, my gaze flickering towards Isabella. Privately, Isabella let out a delicate, theatrical sigh. "Darling, must we? We were just talking to the Hendersons." "It will only take a moment," I pleaded, looking only at him. Alastair's eyes, the same cold blue as my own, narrowed. He saw the desperation in my face, and it annoyed him. He led me to a small alcove, partially hidden by a large potted fern. The pretense of privacy was a joke. "What is it, Alara? This is an important night." "It's Leo," I whispered, my throat closing up. His face went rigid. "I told you. I have made my position on that matter clear. They found a new procedure." I pushed, unfolding the crumpled paper. "In Switzerland, it has a 90% success rate. It could fix his heart." "Fix it, father." I held the paper out to him. He didn't even look at it. "And I'm sure it costs a fortune," he said, his voice flat and bored. "It does," I admitted, shame and hope warring in my chest. "But you could." "No." The word was a stone. Cold, hard, and final. "Please," I begged, the last of my pride shredding away. "He's your son. He is a poor investment," Alastair said, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "A money pit. I have given you and that boy more than enough. I have paid for doctors, for comfortable care. I will not bankrupt myself for a miracle that doesn't exist. It's not a miracle. It's science. Look at the paper." "I will not," he hissed, his fingers biting into my arm. His public smile never wavered for the people glancing our way. "You're making a scene. You are embarrassing me." Isabella had drifted closer, her expression one of amused contempt. "Honestly, Alara, your father has a business to run. He can't be expected to fund every fantasy." "He's my brother," I choked out, tears finally blurring the glittering room. He's dying? Alistair leaned in, his breath smelling of expensive whiskey and cruelty. Then let him die with some dignity. Not with his sister begging for scraps at a party. It's unseemly. He released my arm, leaving angry red marks on my skin. He turned his back on me. He just walked away. The orchestra swelled, covering the sound of my world shattering. Humiliation was a physical thing. It was a heat that crawled up my neck, a sickness that churned in my stomach. The eyes of the guests, curious and judging, felt like tiny needles on my skin. I saw him laughing with a senator, Isabella patting his arm. He had already forgotten me. He had sentenced his own son to death and ordered another glass of champagne. Something inside me snapped. The unbearable weight of it all. The years of neglect, the constant belittling, the cold, hard fact of his monstrousness. It broke me. I turned and ran. I didn't know where I was going. I just had to get out. Away from the music, the laughter, the suffocating perfume of their indifference. I pushed through a side door, into a service corridor. The air was cooler here, smelling of bleach and efficiency. I kept running, my cheap heels slipping on the polished concrete. Tears streamed down my face, hot and blinding. I saw a bank of elevators at the end of the hall. One was marked private. I didn't care. I jabbed the button, my breath coming in ragged sobs. The doors slid open with a quiet, expensive hiss. I stumbled inside, pressing my back against the cool wood paneling, squeezing my eyes shut. The doors started to close. A hand shot out, stopping them. A very large hand. A man stepped inside. He was not alone. Two other men, broad and silent as mountains, filed in behind him, standing on either side of the doors. They faced forward, their faces blank and watchful. The doors slid shut, encasing the four of us in a small, silent box. The air changed. It became heavy, charged. I opened my eyes and looked at the man who had joined me. He was tall, dressed in a black suit, so exquisitely tailored it seemed to be a part of him. His hair was black. His face was all harsh angles and shadows. He wasn't handsome in the way of movie stars. He was compelling, like a storm cloud or the edge of a blade. But it was his eyes that held me. They were dark, almost black, and utterly still. They absorbed the light in the elevator and gave nothing back. He was watching me, not with curiosity, not with pity, with an unnerving, analytical calm, as if he were dissecting me layer by layer. This was Damien Volkov. I didn't know his name then, but I knew what he was. Power. The dangerous kind. The kind that didn't need to announce itself. It was in the way his men stood, a perfect wall of lethal deference. It was in the absolute stillness of his posture. It was in the air around him, which crackled with unspoken threat. I realized my mistake. The private sign hadn't been a suggestion. I had breached a fortress. I tried to make myself smaller, pressing harder against the wall. My sobs had caught in my throat, choked off by a new, more immediate fear. One of the guards, a giant with a shaved head and a scar that bisected his eyebrow, took a half-step toward me. It was a minimal movement, but it was filled with menace. "Sir," the guard rumbled, his voice like grinding stones. The man in the black suit didn't even look at him. He lifted one hand just a few inches, a simple, economical gesture. The guard froze instantly. He stepped back into place, his eyes once again fixed on the door. Absolute authority. It was terrifying to witness. The man's gaze dropped from my face to my hand. The hand still clutching the crumpled, tear-stained hospital estimate. He said nothing. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. The elevator ascended with a faint, smooth hum, a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the tense quiet. He just watched my hand. I felt an irrational urge to hide it, to protect the paper that held all my pain and desperation. But I was frozen. Finally, he spoke. His voice was quiet, deeper than I expected. It wasn't loud or booming. It was a low vibration that seemed to settle in my bones. It was a voice polished by other people's cruelty. He asked a single question. "Who made you run?" The question hung in the air, precise and sharp as a scalpel. It wasn't, "What's wrong?" or "Are you okay?" It was a question that bypassed the tears and the panic and went straight to the cause, to the agent of my pain. I couldn't answer. My throat was locked tight. He didn't press. He just waited, his dark eyes holding mine. There was no impatience in them, just a vast, unnerving stillness. The elevator chimed softly and the doors slid open. They revealed a penthouse suite, expansive, minimalist, with floor-to-ceiling windows showing the city lights spread out like a carpet of fallen stars. The two guards stepped out, taking up positions on either side of the doorway, their backs to us. The man in the black suit didn't move. He was still looking at me, at the paper in my hand. "My father," I finally whispered. The words felt like they were scraped from my lungs. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, an acknowledgement. He took a step out of the elevator, then paused, half turning back to me. "The hospital," he said. It wasn't a question. "Give it to me." It was a command, quiet but absolute. I hesitated. That piece of paper felt like the last piece of my heart. Giving it to this stranger felt like a surrender I wasn't ready to make. "No," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "Thank you. I'm sorry for intruding." I reached for the elevator button to close the doors. His hand moved faster than I could have imagined, not touching me, but resting on the doorframe, blocking my path. "Your brother is dying," he stated. "That paper is the price of his life. You cannot afford it. Your father will not pay it. These are facts. Your pride is a luxury you do not have time for." His words were cold, brutal logic. They stripped away all emotion and left only the raw, ugly truth. He knew. He had looked at me for less than 2 minutes, and he knew everything that mattered. "Ow," I started, but the word died on my lips. "I know your father," he said, and the way he said it sent a chill down my spine. It was not a statement of acquaintance. It was a statement of assessment. Alistair Finch values his image above all things. A sick child is a crack in the facade. A desperate daughter is a blemish. He would erase you both to keep his portrait perfect. He was describing the monster I had known my whole life. "Who are you?" I whispered. "I am the man your father owes a great deal of money to," he said, his voice devoid of inflection. "Money he clearly does not have, if he cannot take care of his own son." Suddenly, it all clicked into place. My father's desperation, his refusal. It wasn't just cruelty. It was financial ruin, hidden behind a mask of philanthropy. "Now," the man said, his patience wearing thin, a subtle shift in the line of his jaw. "The paper." He extended his hand. This time I gave it to him. My fingers brushed against his. His skin was cool. He took the crumpled sheet and smoothed it out with careful, deliberate movements. He glanced at the figure, his expression unchanging. The number that had shattered my world seemed to mean nothing to him. He pulled out a phone and dialed a number. He didn't speak into it. He simply took a picture of the estimate and sent it. A moment later, he spoke into the phone. One word. "Handle it." He hung up. He looked at me. "The hospital has been instructed to prepare for the surgery. A team from Zurich is being flown in tonight. The funds have been transferred." Just like that. With a single word, he had moved mountains. He had done the impossible. I stared at him, my mind reeling. The relief was so immense it felt like a physical blow. It buckled my knees. I sway, my head light. "But what?" I stammered. "I have nothing. I can't possibly repay you." "I am not buying you," he said, his gaze intense. "I'm buying time. Your brother's time. The repayment is a conversation for another day. A day when he is safe." He gestured for me to step out of the elevator. "We are going to hospital. Now." I moved as if in a dream, my feet barely touching the ground. The silent guard, the one with the scar, was named Ivan. He drove. The man, Damien Volkov, sat in the back with me. The cavernous interior of the black sedan was like another world, silent and insulated from the city outside. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just stared out the window as the familiar streets of my life blurred past, rendered unreal by the sheer velocity of the night's events. Damien did not try to talk to me. He sat in the opposite corner of the spacious seat, a figure of stillness and shadow. He looked at his phone, his face illuminated by its cold blue light. He was coordinating an army, I realized. An army of specialists, administrators, and pilots, all for my brother, all with a few quiet taps of his thumb. We arrived at the hospital in a fraction of the time it would have taken me. The change was immediate and shocking. The usual tired-looking nurses and bureaucratic red tape were gone. The head of the cardiac department met us at the entrance, his face a mixture of awe and terror. "Mr. Volkov," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "everything is being prepared. The Zurich team is en route. The ore is being prepped." Damien just nodded, his gaze sweeping the lobby until it landed on me. "Take her to her brother," he commanded. I was whisked through corridors that had previously been barriers. Doors opened before me. People spoke in hushed, respectful tones. The power this man wielded was absolute. It was terrifying, and it was all being used to save Leo. I found my brother in his room, looking small and pale in the oversized bed. He was drawing in a sketchbook, his small hand moving with intense concentration. He looked up when I came in, and his face broke into a wide, beautiful smile that always seemed too big for his fragile body. "Alara." I rushed to his side, hugging him carefully, burying my face in his hair. I was crying again, but these were different tears. They were tears of dizzying, disbelieving relief. "What is it?" he asked, his voice full of concern. "Are you sad?" "No, Leo," I whispered, pulling back to look at him. "No, I'm not sad. Something wonderful has happened." Just then, the door opened. Damien Volkov stood in the doorway. He was too large for the room, too dark, too intense. He seemed to suck all the air and light out of the cheerful, pediatric space. He looked utterly alien here. Leo's eyes widened. He had never seen anyone like Damien before. He wasn't afraid, though. Leo's innocence was a shield against the kind of fear that adults understood. He was just curious. He looked at the towering, silent man in the doorway. Then he looked at me and my tear-streaked face. Then he looked back at Damien. And in the clear, piping voice of a 10-year-old boy, he asked the question that broke through all the tension and fear. "Are you afraid of my mama?" My breath caught. He meant me. Since our mother died, I was the only mother he had ever known. The corner of Damien Volkov's mouth twitched. It was not a smile. It was something far rarer and more startling. The faintest ghost of an expression. He took a slow step into the room. He looked down at the small boy in the bed. And for the first time, his voice lost its hard, commanding edge. It was still quiet, but it was different. Softer. "No," Damien said. "I am not." He paused, his dark eyes meeting mine over Leo's head. "But I'm working on it," he added. I had no idea what that meant. But the quiet sincerity in his voice was another shock in a night full of them. He didn't stay in the room. He just nodded once, a gesture of respect towards my brother, and then retreated back into the hallway, a silent guardian in the shadows. The hours that followed were a blur. Doctors came and went. Nurses prepped Leo. The Swiss team arrived, a whirlwind of calm, focused expertise. Through it all, I sat in the hard plastic chair in the waiting room. And through it all, Damien Volkov was there. He didn't sit with me. He stood by the window at the far end of the long, sterile corridor, a silhouette against the lightening sky. He took calls, his voice a low, indecipherable murmur. He sent messages. He commanded his empire from a hospital waiting area. He never once intruded on my vigil. He never asked for thanks. He never demanded my attention. But he was there, a constant, unmoving, protective presence. I had been alone in this fight for so long. The sheer fact of his presence, the quiet companionship of this dangerous, terrifying man, was a comfort so profound it almost hurt. He was not a good man. I knew that in my bones. Good men did not command such fear. Good men did not have scars on their lieutenants' faces. But he had been kind to me. No, not kind. Kindness was soft. He was not soft. He had been effective. He had been logical. He had seen a problem and solved it. My brother's life was a transaction to him. And yet, he had stayed. He didn't have to. The money was paid. The doctors were here. His part was done. But he stayed. That was the thought that circled in my mind as the sun rose, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and soft pink. He stayed. The surgery took 8 hours. 8 hours of sitting, staring at a clock, my hands clenched so tight my knuckles were white. Damien never moved from his post by the window. He was as tireless and still as a statue. Finally, the lead surgeon, a woman with tired, intelligent eyes, came out. She smiled. A real, genuine smile. It was a complete success, she said. His heart is strong. He's a fighter. The world, which had been gray and muted, exploded into color. I sobbed, my body shaking with a relief so total it was painful. I was vaguely aware of the surgeon patting my shoulder, of nurses offering me water. When I finally looked up, my vision blurry with tears, I saw Damien. He was walking toward me. He stopped a few feet away. He didn't offer a hand or a comforting word. He simply watched me, his face unreadable as ever. But I saw something in his eyes, a flicker of something, not pity, understanding. He waited until my sobs subsided into shuddering breaths. He is safe, Damien stated, as if closing a ledger. Yes, I breathed. Thank you. I don't know how I can ever. Go, he interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. Be with him. He turned and walked away without another word, his 2 guards falling in his step behind him. And just like that, he was gone. The next few days were a haven of quiet joy. Leo recovered with a speed that amazed the doctors. Color returned to his cheeks. His breathing was even and strong. The tired, pained look in his eyes was replaced by a bright, mischievous spark. For the first time in years, I could breathe too. The hospital treated us like royalty. Leo had the best private room, the best care. Every bill was handled before it ever reached me. I did not hear from Damien Volkov. There were no calls, no messages, no demands. The silence was unnerving. I was living on borrowed time, in a gilded cage of his making, and I had no idea when the bill would come due. The first sign of the old world intruding on the new came a week later. My father appeared at the hospital. He didn't come to see Leo. He came to see me. He cornered me in the hallway as I was coming back from the cafeteria. He looked different. His usual polished confidence was gone, replaced by a sheen of desperate sweat on his brow. Alara, he began, his voice a low, urgent hiss. We need to talk. We have nothing to talk about, I said, my voice cold. The fear I used to feel in his presence was gone, burned away by the fires of that night. Don't you take that tone with me, he snapped, grabbing my arm. Do you have any idea what you've done? I pulled my arm away. I saved my brother's life. Something you refused to do. His face contorted with fury and something else. Fear. You involved Damien Volkov, he whispered, glancing around the empty corridor as if the name itself could summon the man. You stupid, stupid girl. He is not some knight in shining armor. He is a shark, and you just threw blood in the water. He helped me, I said simply. He owns you, my father spat. He owns me. That debt I owed him. He's going to use you to leverage it. He's going to destroy us. So that was it. His fear wasn't for me. It was for himself. What do you want, Alistair? I asked, using his first name for the first time in my life. The word felt good in my mouth. It felt like equality. His eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in rage. I want you to fix this. Go to him. Tell him. Tell him you'll be his. A payment. For my debt. It's the only way he'll let me off the hook. I stared at him. I stared at this man who was my father, who was calmly, rationally trying to sell me to the mob to save his own skin. The man who had called his own son a poor investment. He saw the look on my face and misunderstood it. It's a good deal for you, Alara, he said, his voice becoming wheedling persuasive. A man like that, he can give you anything. A better life than you've ever had. You should be thanking me. I started to laugh. It was a hollow, bitter sound. Thank you, I said, my voice dripping with contempt. For what? For abandoning your son? For trying to trade your daughter, like property? You are pathetic. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing in the hallway, his mouth agape. I knew then that he would not let this go. He was a cornered animal. The smear campaign began 2 days later. It started as whispers on gossip sites. Anonymous friends who were worried about Alara Finch. She was emotionally unstable, after her brother's illness. She had a history of erratic behavior. Then it escalated. A tabloid ran a story, complete with grainy photos of me looking distressed outside the hospital. The headline read, "Troubled heiress latches on a shady billionaire." The article painted me as a gold digger, a mentally fragile woman who had latched onto a dangerous man for his money. It quoted sources close to the family, Alistair and Isabella, no doubt, who expressed their deep concern. They were trying to discredit me, to paint me as a liar before I could ever tell the truth about my father, to isolate me. The hospital staff, who had been so kind, now looked at me with a mixture of pity and suspicion. The shame was a familiar, cloying blanket. That evening, as I was sitting by Leo's bed, reading to him as he drifted asleep, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I answered, my heart pounding. Alara, Damien Volkov's voice. It was the first time he had called me. "Yes," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I have seen the news," he said. It was a simple statement of fact. "It's not true," I said immediately. "My father—" "I know," he interrupted. His voice was calm, but there was a new edge to it. A cold, sharp anger that was far more frightening than any shouting. "He is a foolish man. He thinks a newspaper can fight me." There was a pause. "Are you all right?" he asked. The simple question, the genuine concern in his voice, undid me. "No," I admitted, my voice thick with unshed tears. "Good," he said. I blinked, confused. "Good. Anger is better than fear," he clarified. "Stay angry. I'm sending a car. It will take you and your brother to a safe location. The hospital is no longer secure, but his care has been arranged. A private wing of the best recovery clinic in the state. With its own security, it was not a suggestion. It was a declaration of what was already happening. You are not asking me," I said, a faint spark of defiance rising through the misery. "You are telling me." There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line. "Yes," he said, and I could almost hear that ghost of a smile in his voice again. "We are working on the difference." The car was a sleek, black town car, even more luxurious than the last one. Ivan was at the wheel, his presence a silent promise of security. He helped me move a sleepy Leo, who was thrilled by the adventure of a late-night car ride. The clinic was less a medical facility and more a five-star hotel nestled in a secluded, wooded estate. Leo's suite was bigger than my entire apartment, with a balcony overlooking a serene garden. I was given the adjoining suite. For the next 2 weeks, we lived in a bubble of quiet safety. Leo thrived, growing stronger every day. I spent my days with him, walking in the gardens, reading, watching movies. But at night, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, the silence of the gilded cage pressing in on me. I was safe. I was cared for. I was a prisoner. I knew a reckoning was coming. For my father. For me. Damien was gathering his forces. The silence was the deep breath before the plunge. He was dismantling my father's life, piece by piece. I didn't know how, but I felt it. I felt the tremors of a collapsing empire. Ivan was my only link to that outside world. He was a constant, silent presence on the estate. He never spoke unless spoken to, but his eyes missed nothing. One afternoon, I found him in the garden, watching Leo chase a butterfly. "Ivan," I said, approaching him. He turned to me, his expression impassive. "Miss Finch, what is he doing?" I asked. "Damien, what is happening?" Ivan considered me for a long moment. "He is gathering proof," he said finally, his voice a low rumble. "Your father has many secrets. Financial crimes, betrayals. Mr. Volkov is simply collecting them." "And then what?" "And then," Ivan said, his gaze shifting back to Leo, "there will be a lesson. Your father tried to use the press. A public weapon. The lesson will also be public." A week later, a package arrived for me. It was a large, flat box. Inside was a dress. It was a deep, midnight blue, the color of the sky just after sunset. The fabric was heavy silk that felt like water in my hands. It was simple, elegant, and impossibly expensive. There was a car with it. It contained only a date, a time, and an address. The annual Varden Foundation Charity Gala, the most exclusive, high-profile event of the year. The event where Alastair Finch was scheduled to receive the Philanthropist of the Year award. The stage was set. The night of the gala, I felt a familiar dread mixed with a new, cold resolve. I put on the dress. It fit perfectly. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. The woman staring back was not the frightened girl from the last party. Her eyes were clear. Her spine was straight. She was angry, just as he told me to be. Damien was waiting for me in the lobby of the estate. He was in a black tuxedo. He looked less like a guest and more like the personification of judgment. He didn't say I looked beautiful. He didn't offer any empty compliments. His dark eyes swept over me, and he gave a single, sharp nod of approval. It was more meaningful than 1,000 pretty words. "Are you ready?" he asked. "No," I said honestly, "but it doesn't matter." That faint twitch at the corner of his mouth appeared again. "Good." We rode to the gala in silence. When we arrived, the entrance was a chaotic sea of flashing cameras and shouting reporters. The moment we stepped out of the car, the chaos focused on us. "Mr. Volkov, Mr. Volkov, Alara, is it true you're living with him? Is it true your father has disowned you?" The questions were a barrage of tiny, poisoned darts. I flinched, instinctively wanting to shrink away. Damien's hand came to rest on the small of my back. It wasn't a possessive gesture. It was a point of stability, a silent message. "I am here. Do not falter." His presence was a shield. The reporters, sensing the dangerous aura around him, kept a respectful distance. We walked up the red carpet, a silent island in a storm of noise. Inside, the ballroom was even more opulent than my father's. It was a glittering spectacle of old money and new power. And every eye was on us. I saw them immediately, Alastair and Isabella, holding court at a central table. Isabella's face was a mask of pure venom when she saw me on Damien's arm. Alastair looked like he had seen a ghost wearing a couture gown and standing next to the devil himself. Damien led me to a table in the shadows at the edge of the room, a perfect vantage point. "He looks afraid," I murmured, watching my father. "He is," Damien said, his gaze fixed on Alastair. "But he is also arrogant. He still thinks he can control the story." We sat through the dinner, a silent, watchful pair. People gave our table a wide berth. We were untouchable, an island of cold power in the warm, chattering room. Finally, the time came for the award. The host, a famous actor, gave a gushing introduction about Alastair Finch's generosity, his commitment to the city, his unimpeachable character. I felt a wave of nausea. Alastair walked to the stage to a round of thunderous applause. He accepted the heavy glass award, his smile wide and practiced. He began his speech. He thanked the foundation. He spoke of the importance of giving back. And then, he turned his attention to his family. "This is a difficult night for me, in some ways," he said, his voice taking on a somber, pained tone. "As some of you may know, my family has been going through a private struggle." The room went quiet. All eyes were on him. "My beloved daughter, Alara," he continued, his gaze sweeping the room until it landed on me, "has been unwell. Her struggles have been a great burden on our hearts. We have tried to get her the best help, but recently, she has fallen under a dangerous influence." He was doing it. He was using this platform, this moment of honor, to paint me as a crazy, manipulated victim, to destroy my credibility forever. "We pray for her recovery," he finished, his voice thick with false emotion. "And we hope that she will one day return to the family that loves her." The room was filled with murmurs of sympathy. Heads turned to look at me with pity. I felt the blood drain from my face. This was his final move. Public humiliation. The polished monster at his most cruel. But the fear was gone. All that was left was ice-cold rage. I looked at Damien. He was perfectly still, his face carved from stone. He just watched me, waiting. This was my choice. My fight. I stood up. The movement was small, but in the quiet, watchful room, it was a gunshot. Every eye swung to me. I started walking toward the stage. My heels clicked on a marble floor, the sound echoing in the sudden, complete silence. Alistair's smile faltered. He saw the look on my face. "Alara," he said, his voice a warning. "Don't do this. You're not well." I reached the steps of the stage and walked up them. I stood beside him, taking the other microphone. "My name is Alara Finch," I said, my voice shaking but clear. It carried through the enormous room. "And my father is a liar." A collective gasp went through the audience. Alistair's face turned white with fury. "Security," he hissed. "Get her off the stage." "My father speaks of private struggles," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "Let me tell you about them. The struggle of my 10-year-old brother, Leo, who was dying because this philanthropist of the year called him a poor investment and refused to pay for the surgery that would save his life." The murmurs in the crowd grew louder, turning from sympathy to confusion. "He speaks of dangerous influences," I said, my eyes finding Damien in the shadows. "The only dangerous man I know is the one standing right here. A man who would let his own son die to protect his image. A man who, when I begged him for help, told me to let my brother die with dignity." "She's hysterical," Alistair shouted, trying to grab the microphone from me. "She's delusional." I held on, my knuckles white. "Am I?" I said, my voice rising. "Am I delusional?" And then Damien moved. He didn't get up. He simply made a small, subtle gesture with his hand. Ivan, who had been standing unnoticed by the technical booth, nodded once. The two massive screens on either side of the stage, which had been showing the Foundation's logo, flickered to life. An audio file began to play. My voice, desperate and pleading. "Please, he's your son." And then Alistair's voice, cold and venomous. "He is a poor investment, a money pit. Then let him die with some dignity." It was the recording of our conversation from that first gala. The entire room heard it. The silence was absolute. Stunned. Alistair froze, his face a mask of horror. He stared at the screens as if he couldn't believe what was happening. But Damien wasn't finished. The audio was replaced by documents, bank statements, offshore accounts. Arrows and highlights showed a clear trail of embezzlement from his own company's pension fund. The money he claimed he didn't have for Leo. Then came another audio file. Alistair's voice again, this time speaking to Damien on the phone a week ago. "Volkov, listen to me. The girl, Alara, take her. She's yours. As payment for my debt. Just call off your dogs. Leave my finances alone." The sound of a man selling his own daughter. The collapse was instantaneous and total. The polished facade of Alistair Finch shattered into a million pieces, right there on the stage of his greatest triumph. The crowd erupted, not in murmurs, but in gasps of outrage and disgust. People were standing up, staring at him with open revulsion. Isabella had shrunk in her chair, her face ashen, trying to become invisible. Alistair looked from the screens to the horrified faces in the crowd, to me. His eyes were no longer cold or cruel. They were the eyes of a completely broken man. I looked at him, at the ruin he had brought upon himself. I felt no pity, no triumph, just a quiet, hollow emptiness. The end of a long, painful chapter. I put the microphone back in its stand. I walked off the stage, through the stunned, parting crowd. I walked back to the table in the shadows. Damien stood as I approached. He looked at me, his dark eyes searching my face. "It is done," he said quietly. "Yes," I whispered. I felt a tremor run through me, the delayed shock of the confrontation. My legs felt weak. He reached out and put his hand on my arm, steadying me. His touch was warm, solid. "Let's go home," he said. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Alistair Finch was ruined. Socially, financially, professionally. The board of his company ousted him the next morning. The SEC launched an investigation. He was a pariah. I never saw him again. We returned to the secluded estate. Leo was sleeping soundly, safe and unaware of the storm that had just broken. I stood on the balcony of my suite, breathing in the cool night air. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a profound exhaustion. I heard a soft sound behind me. Damien was standing in the doorway. "Can I join you?" he asked. It was the first time he had ever asked my permission for anything. "Yes," I said. He walked to the railing, standing a few feet from me. We looked out at the dark, sleeping gardens. "He can't hurt you anymore," Damien said. "Or your brother." "I know," I said quietly. "Thank you." The words felt inadequate. Small. "You do not need to thank me," he said. "Your father was a problem. I eliminated it. It was more than that." I insisted, turning to face him. "You saved Leo's life. You protected us. You gave me my voice back tonight. I am in your debt." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. He looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "When I first saw you," he said, his voice a low murmur, "in that elevator, you were terrified, but your fear was not for yourself. It was for your brother. In my world, loyalty like that is a rare thing. It is the only currency that matters." He took a step closer. "Your father tried to offer you to me as a payment," he continued, a note of deep disgust in his voice. "He does not understand value. He thinks everything can be bought and sold. He is wrong." My heart was pounding. I didn't know what he was going to say next. I was afraid of it. "You owe me nothing, Elara," he said, his voice firm and clear. "The debt is paid. Your father's ruin was the price. You are free." Free. The word was a shock. "What does that mean?" I whispered. "It means you can walk away," he said. "I have set up a trust for you and your brother. You will never have to worry about money again. You can go anywhere, do anything. You're not my prisoner. You're not my property. Your choice is your own." He was giving me an out, an escape from his dark, dangerous world. Everything I should have wanted. But as I looked at him, at this terrifying, powerful man who had shown me more honor and protection than my own family ever had, the thought of leaving felt wrong. It felt like running again. "And what if I don't want to go?" I asked, my voice barely audible. His stillness was absolute. He watched me, his dark eyes searching for the truth in mine. "Then you stay," he said simply. "As what?" I pressed, needing to understand. "Your mistress? Your ward? Another piece of your collection?" A flicker of something. Anger? Pain crossed his face. "No," he said, his voice rough. "As you. As Elara. That is all I have ever wanted." He raised a hand, as if to touch my face, but stopped himself, letting it fall back to his side. It was a gesture of immense control. "I will not take a choice from you," he said. "I have seen what happens when your choices are taken away. When you are ready, if you are ever ready, you will come to me. Until then, you are safe here, and you are free." He held my gaze for one more long, intense moment. Then he turned and left, leaving me alone with the silence and the weight of a choice I never thought I would have. 3 months passed. The world settled into a new shape. Leo was completely healed. He was vibrant and loud and full of life. We moved out of the clinic and into a beautiful house in the city, one that Damien had arranged. It had a yard for Leo to play in. The trust was real. The money was there. I was, for all intents and purposes, completely independent. I did not see Damien. He kept his word. He did not call. He did not visit. He left me utterly alone. But his presence was a constant, invisible shield around us. I knew, without being told, that we were the most well-protected people in the city. I spent my days rediscovering a life without constant fear. I helped Leo catch up on his schooling. I learned to cook things that weren't cheap and fast. I learned to sleep through the night. But something was missing. The silence. The silence he had promised me was here, but it felt empty now. Not like safety, but like absence. I found myself thinking of him, of his quiet presence in the hospital corridor, of the feeling of his hand on my back, of the rare, almost smile that transformed his harsh face. He had given me freedom, but I had never felt more tied to anyone in my life. One day, I was going through the mail and found a letter from the hospital's charitable foundation. They were holding a fundraiser. An idea began to form in my mind. I used the money from a trust. I made a large, anonymous donation to the hospital, specifically to fund the kind of experimental surgeries that had saved Leo. Then I went further. I contacted the foundation. I didn't want to just give money. I wanted to help. With my background as an assistant and my intimate knowledge of the patient side of the system, I was a perfect fit. I started volunteering, then took a position managing cases like my own, families who were falling through the cracks, who needed an advocate. I found my purpose there. I was good at it. I was ruthless in cutting through red tape. I was compassionate with the families. I was using the strength I had found, the voice he had given me back. I was not a victim anymore. I was not a survivor. I was a force. One afternoon, 6 months after the gala, I knew it was time. I had not run. I had built a life. I had found my own power. My choice was finally, truly my own. I drove to the Volkov building, a sleek, black skyscraper that pierced the heart of the city's financial district. I had never been here before. I walked into the lobby. It was a cathedral of marble and glass, hushed and intimidating. The security guards watched me, their eyes sharp. I walked to the main reception desk. "I am here to see Mr. Volkov," I said. "My name is Alara Finch." The receptionist, a cool blonde, looked me up and down. I was in my simple work clothes, a stark contrast to the power suits around me. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, her voice dripping with skepticism. "No," I said, "but he will see me." Before she could argue, a familiar, hulking shape detached itself from the shadows near the elevator bank. "Ivan." He walked toward me, his face, for the first time I had ever seen, holding a faint hint of a smile. He nodded to the terrified receptionist. "She's with him." He led me to the private elevator, the same one where my new life had begun. We rode up in silence. The doors opened directly into Damien's office. It was a vast space, with one wall made entirely of glass, offering a god's-eye view of the city. Damien was not at his desk. He was standing by the window, his back to me, looking out over his kingdom. He was the same silhouette I remembered from the hospital. Ivan stepped back into the elevator, and the doors slid shut, leaving us alone. The silence was thick with everything unsaid between us. He didn't turn around. "The foundation called me," he said, his voice quiet. "They spoke of a new administrator. Fierce, incorruptible, someone who gets things done. They didn't know it was you. But I did." He still didn't turn. I walked slowly, deliberately, across the vast expanse of the office until I was standing just behind him. "I wasn't running," I said softly. "I was building." "I know," he said. "I'm not afraid anymore," I told his reflection in the glass. "Not of my father, not of the world, and not of you." "I know," he said again. Finally, he turned to face me. The stillness in his eyes was still there, but it was different now. It was not the stillness of a predator. It was the stillness of a man who has been waiting. "You are free, Alara," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You can still walk away." "I don't want to," I said. My voice was steady. "Sure, I choose to be here." A world of emotion passed through his dark eyes. Relief, hope, a vulnerability I had never seen before. He reached out, his hand hovering in the air for a moment before he gently, finally, touched my face. His thumb brushed against my cheekbone. His touch was not a brand of ownership. It was a question. I leaned into his hand, closing my eyes. A silent answer. "I am not a good man," he whispered, his voice rough with an emotion he had held back for so long. "I know," I whispered back, opening my eyes to look at him. "But you were good to me, and to my brother. That is enough." He stepped closer, closing the final distance between us. He was a mountain of a man, radiating power and danger, but I felt no fear. I only felt like I was home. "Stay," he said. It was not a command. It was a plea. "I will," I promised. And so I did. I tell you this now, a year after that day in his office. My father is a ghost, a forgotten headline. My brother is a happy, healthy teenager who thinks Damien is the coolest person on earth. And me, I am not the Mafia boss's woman. I am not a kept thing in a gilded cage. I run the Volkov Foundation, the charitable arm of his empire. It is my own kingdom built from the ashes of my past. I wield a different kind of power than he does, the power to heal, to build, to protect the vulnerable. It is a power he respects, a power he shields. Our worlds, his of shadow and mine of light, exist in a delicate, fierce balance. He is still a dangerous man. He is still feared. He is still the protective tyrant, the shadow of the city. But with me, in the quiet moments when the city is asleep below us, he is just Damien, a man who found a flicker of loyalty in a terrified girl and chose to protect it. My father thought he was giving me to a monster to erase a debt. He was wrong. He gave me to the one man in the world who would see my worth, not as a commodity, but as a strength equal to his own. He led me to the place I was always meant to be, not behind him or beneath him, but beside him,